So a new Fox News poll shows that a majority of Americans are actually more hopeful after the presidential election. Some big partisan divides, though, on how people feel, and a majority plan to see what Biden is going to do once in office and actually give him a chance. Democratic strategist and founding partner of Northern Star Strategies, Michael Starr Hopkins, and senior director of policy at the Conservative Partnership Institute, and my fantastic co-host today, Rachel Bovard, are back to weigh in on all of this. Rachel, this is the part that kind of jumped out at me from this Fox News poll, which I guess it's a sign of how ugly times are that I found these numbers encouraging. But they found that among Republicans, 58% say that they will either support or at least give Biden a chance, while 41% say that that is never going to happen. Put this in context of how you think the overall mood of the GOP base is these days.
Well, I think it sort of transcends party lines in the sense that I think Americans generally, we have this irrational exuberance and optimism that makes us unique. We're not entirely cynical yet. But I think for Republicans, they will give Joe Biden, I think, a chance to prove himself, right? He preached a message of unity. But I don't think that they're stupid, right? They remember the last 4 years. I think there's a pretty big segment of the Republican Party that doesn't feel like President Trump was given a chance. They feel like he was undermined, by a cabal of media and leftists from the beginning. And so I think it's a trust but verify situation. Look, if Joe Biden wants to come out and actually practice the unity he's preaching, then that's one thing. But there are a lot of members of the Democrat Party, I think, that are already talking about, shunning Republicans, putting them on lists, all this kind of stuff. That may not be Joe Biden, but I think we're going to have to wait and see.
Michael, I also thought this was kind of interesting. So they asked this question about whether you have had an argument with your friend or your family about the election after Election Day. And so the numbers are better this time around than they were back in 2016. In 2016, a bare majority, 51%, said they'd had some argument with their friends or their family about the election. This time around, it's only 39%. So I guess maybe it's just because we're not seeing each other due to the pandemic. But apparently fewer arguments and families are being divided over the election results this time around.
Yeah, I think that's partly a product of Trump supporters and Democrats not really having much conversation anymore. And then also I think that's a product of the pandemic. But I think people should feel more hopeful after the last 4 years and the exhaustion, both emotionally and physically. I think we now have a chance to turn the corner and at least bring the country together around the idea that we can get some things done. The Trump administration was so, fire blowing every day. I think this administration is going to come off as boring, honestly. And I think that's a good thing. I think Americans want to get back to being able to sit down at their dinner table and just eat dinner and have conversation and not be ready to, go at each other over what Trump did that day.
They want to go back to brunch, Rachel. Do you think that the sentiment is going to be the same on the Republican side, though? Because, look, first of all, there's going to be plenty to be upset about in the Biden administration. Let's make no mistake about that. But also there's an entire right-wing media ecosystem that is excellent at stoking over-the-top outrage. So do you agree with that idea that, all around it's going to be sort of ho-hum and boring for people during the Biden years?
I think there will be less of the sort of fire-breathing hysteria. Obviously you're going to see right-wing media report on things they disagree with. But, I think the sort of general meltdown and mayhem that you just saw on every single channel constantly during the Trump administration will be missing. And so I think the temperature and the volume will be turned down a bit. I don't think it's going to be, everybody holding hands and singing Kumbaya, because that's just not where we are as a country. And I don't think that Joe Biden's governing agenda, despite his, promises of unity, I think there are going to be a lot of things that Republicans disagree with. And that's okay, right? We live in a country with two different political parties for that reason. So, I don't think that we're going to see the heights of the foaming and frothing that we saw during the Trump administration. But partly, I think that's just due to the coverage that it's going to receive, which is going to be, if now is any indication, startlingly less than we saw it with Trump. We're getting biopics about Biden's dogs, for instance, right? What do you do with that?
Rachel, what is your sort of temperature reading on the Stop the Steal contingent at this point?
I do think it's losing a little bit of its luster and its momentum. I think part of the problem is that the best way to disabuse a conspiracy theory is to actually give it a full airing and disprove it. But we're in sort of this catch-22 where if you do that, then you're accused of peddling the conspiracy theory. So I think a lot of people feel that their feelings about the election never got a fair grievance or a fair airing, right? I think the things that did go to court, and that were dismissed, I actually think that helps, right? It helps people feel like they had their say, that their thoughts and theories were investigated. But I do think a lot of it depends on how things go in Georgia. I think transparency is going to be really important there. I think every side needs to do their part in making this, as transparent as possible to make sure people feel like it's fair. How we get that trust back is going to be something I think that the whole country is going to have to work at in the next probably decade.
Yeah, I think that's well said. All right, guys, thank you so much. Appreciate you both.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Coming up, the House is set to vote on a measure to increase stimulus checks to $2,000 today, and President Trump is calling on the Senate to do the same. We'll see if they bother to do that. Journalist Ed Jelani is going to talk about whether GOP lawmakers are ultimately going to budge on the issue. That's when Rising continues.